Good afternoon. Agus fáilte óibh den ócáid mór seo I dteach an custom inniuh. Welcome to this state event to remember the burning of the Custom House, which began at 1255, 100 years ago today. My name is Sean Hogan, and on behalf of the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage, I want to welcome each of you attending this event, as well as those watching live on social media and the RTE News channel. I welcome Minister Darragh O'Brien, Minister of State Malcolm Noonan, Minister of State Peter Burke, and Secretary General of the Department Graham Doyle. I welcome in particular representatives of the relatives of those involved in the attack: Gary Deering, Brian Parsons, Aisling Flynn, Pauline Moynihan, and Liam Grace. The state remembers big events and big centenaries, but this group have been coming here to the Custom House on 25th of May for many years, marking and remembering this event in an inclusive manner. We are also joined by Mark Toner from Dublin Fire Brigade Pipe Band, whose predecessors played an important role here 100 years ago today, and by our Defence Forces personnel. Can I now ask Minister for Housing, Local Government and Heritage to address you and to lay a wreath on behalf of the state.
Accordia, Díomh Galéir agus fáilte chuig teach an custom. Is mór an ór dom bheith an seo aniu mar ara tíochta rialtas áitiúil agus idirta an lá stáúil is speisialta céad bliain ó tharla an cas an áis seo. Is ceart go ndéanam iad córóir son na fíor cróige a ghlach páirt san unsaí. Is ceart freisin go guibh nóamíd na ní daoine a fuair bás an lá sin, fuireann an rán seo san áireamh. Cuimhneamh iad inniu orthú Galéir agus a teaghlaigh. It's a special privilege for me to mark this occasion on behalf of the government of our republic. I'm honoured to share it with the descendants of the volunteers who ran the gauntlet of history a century ago today, and of those who left their homes that morning to make their living only to be fatally caught up in the day's events. In the years immediately after the attack, this magnificent building behind me was rebuilt brick by brick to restore it to its full glory as the jewel in the architectural crown of our city. It stands today as a testament to the beauty of our capital and a solemn reminder of the heavy toll that freedom can ask of us. It is on a note of sadness on this year of the centenary that we are so restricted in numbers. However, brighter days lie ahead, and later this year, in conjunction with the Office of Public Works and Fáilte Ireland, we will open a new visitor centre celebrating this beautiful structure, as well as remembering the events of 100 years ago. The history of resistance to foreign rule in our country reaches back through centuries. It's a story marked by heroism and steeped in tragedy. Few moments in that saga of defiance stand out as vividly as the audacious assault on the Custom House here at the height of the War of Independence. The struggle for our freedom in Dublin was fought on razor-thin margins, where the difference between life and death was a matter of seconds. This was an occupied city, suffocating under the heavy weight of a ramped-up military presence where volunteers faced impossible odds. To shatter the mental grip of that occupation, the attack on the Custom House was conceived with sweeping ambition and executed with firm determination. The difference between stunning success and devastating failure was always balanced on a knife edge. The price paid for that difference by the volunteers who dared to undertake the operation was steep. The Dublin Fire Brigade laid down a high sacrifice to ensure that the flames took hold. They were ably supported by members of the Fire Brigade and indeed the Dublin Brigade, who laid down the measures to ensure that the flames took hold in this building. But the Fire Brigade made sure the job was done. Innocent civilians and workers, unfortunately, were caught in the withering crossfire. The city sky was lit up by the inferno for days afterwards. However, from the smouldering ruins would rise a free country, The flames that engulfed the Custom House sent a signal bright and clear to the whole world, a signal that Dublin would no longer be an impoverished city in a global empire, but would become a capital of an independent republic, a free Dublin, a proud Dublin, a true Dublin. The independence project that we embarked upon 100 years ago had many stumbles, moments where we have not lived up to the best ideals or reached our finest hopes. But as our mistakes have been our own, so indeed have our triumphs. A country that never fell to the lure of totalitarianism during the dark years of the 20th century. A country that moved to reconcile the separate traditions on our shared island. A country that has taken its place amongst the nations of the earth. We can take pride in our achievements of peace and prosperity and draw determination from our past to build a better future. The flame of freedom that passed from generation to generation, who believed in those ideals of a better Ireland, ignited the Custom House. The flame illuminated this city, and 100 years ago it still burns brightly in our republic today. It has shone through the dark shadows of wars, recessions, and pandemics. So long as the flame burns deep in the hearts of our people, we will rise to whatever challenge the hand of history lays down for us. Goramila Mahagwith. I would now invite to lay a wreath on behalf of the Irish state for those who died here 100 years ago today.
I now invite Gary Deering from the Custom House Relatives Group to address you and to introduce those who will lay wreaths.
Thank you, Sean. Also, thank you, Minister Darragh O'Brien, for laying the first wreath. I'd also like to thank Tim Carey and the staff of the Customs House and the OPW, who over the last 10 years have been so helpful and accommodating to us. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank our researcher, Des White. Des has put in thousands of hours of research unearthing historical nuggets to share with the families of the men who took part in the burning and with other historians. I'd also like to thank everybody who has attended our commemoration and supported us since the group began. I'm really sorry that due to COVID restrictions that we cannot all be here together to commemorate the centenary. In 2011, on the 90th anniversary of the burning, I sat here alone, so the event would not pass unmarked. On the 91st anniversary, a small group gathered and we laid a wreath for the 5 IRA men who died. The next year, we laid a second wreath for the 4 civilians who died, 2 of which were Customs House staff and 2 were passers-by. We also remember the families who suffered greatly as a result of the burning. The Reilly family suffered greatly with the loss of 2 sons. The Davis family moved back to England after losing their father and still feel the effects of his loss to this day. My own great-grandmother died soon after hearing her oldest son, Johnny Wilson, was being charged with treason, which meant a death sentence. As well as organising the commemoration every year, we have also tried to tell the stories of the people who took part and witnessed the operation. We have done this by using our website, customhousecommemoration.com, and our Facebook page, Custom House Commemoration Group. Now, I would just like to say a few words about the 9 men who died here exactly 100 years ago. First off, the IRA men who sacrificed their lives for the cause of Irish freedom. Captain Patrick O'Reilly. During the day, he was an accounts clerk in Arnott's. His colleagues had no idea he was an officer in the 2nd Battalion of the IRA. Lieutenant Stephen O'Reilly. Educated in St Enda's under P.H. Pearce, Stephen was a talented artist and poet. Volunteer Sean Doyle, a 1916 veteran, a member of GHQ squad, a talented sportsman. His brother Patrick had been executed by the British only a few months before. Volunteer Edward Dorrans. Only 3 months before the raid, Edward had been thrown into the Liffey by the British forces after they raided his home. He was lucky to survive that incident, only to die at the Customs House. Volunteer Dan Head, the young footballer, 17 years of age, brave as a lion, he gave his life while inflicting serious injuries on the auxiliaries. Now, the 2 members of the Customs House staff. Francis Davis, the housekeeper, who was shot after he refused to surrender to the IRA. Francis was known by the IRA to be in possession of a service revolver, hence the IRA's interest in him. Mahon Lawless, a young civil servant, a World War I veteran who died trying to keep his fellow workers safe and was shot by the auxiliaries as they mistook him for an IRA man. The two passers-by who got caught up in the battle. John Bourne, a young man who was cycling home on his lunch break and was caught in the crossfire. James Connolly, a labourer who was shot by the auxiliaries after he failed to stop after being told to do so by the auxiliaries. May they all rest in peace. I'd like to introduce Brian Parsons. Brian is the grandnephew of Stephen and Patrick O'Reilly. Brian will lay a wreath in honour of the IRA men who fought and died here today.
Thank you, Gary. It is an honour for me to be here today to lay a wreath in memory of the 5 volunteers from the Irish Republican Army, Dublin Brigade, who lost their lives in this event 100 years ago. I am a grandnephew of 2 of those volunteers, the O'Reilly brothers, Patrick and Stephen. My grandfather, Charlie, was their older brother. He and his other brothers, Tommy and Seamus, were also volunteers. They lived not far from here at Wellesley Place, just under the shadow of Croke Park. My family have been attending this commemoration since its inception. My earliest memories of the Custom House Memorial Day was in the early 1960s when I attended with my grandmother, Charlie's widow, my mother and my siblings. In those days it started with Mass at Dublin Castle, after which the volunteers marched down Dame Street, College Green, across O'Connell Bridge and down the quays here to the Custom House statue, where a gun salute was part of the ceremony. Growing up in Dublin in the 60s, I would never have imagined that I would be here today to lay this wreath. Whilst we attended the annual commemoration as children and may not have known the details of why, we were aware that it was an important day for our family. For this was a chapter of Irish history that was seldom discussed in our household. The reasons for this I can only speculate. So apart from a few family recollections, most of what I know of the Custom House burning comes from the research carried out by my wife Anne and the work of local historians, some of whom are with us today. I would like to thank them for their efforts in keeping the memories and the stories alive. This annual commemoration event ceased in the early 1980s, and I would like to thank Gary Deering for reviving this event in recent years. This has allowed my own family, including my grandchildren, to continue to participate. Edward Dorrans, Sean Doyle, Daniel Head, Patrick O'Reilly, Stephen O'Reilly. We remember these 5 volunteers today as a father, husband, sons, brothers, uncles, men who fought for a better life for themselves and their fellow countrymen and women. As well as sacrificing their own lives, we must remember that their loss also impacted on the families and loved ones they left behind. Where there are casualties in conflict, there is always a human story. This event is part of our history, and 100 years on, we commemorate their memory. They made a significant contribution during the War of Independence and paid a heavy price. I will lay the wreath at this statue, which was unveiled in 1956. It was said on that day by Oscar Traynor that the funding for this memorial statue came entirely from the contributions of thousands of the citizens of Dublin, by their shillings and pence. There was no large contributions to make the collector's task easier. The monument is a tribute not only to the dead, but also to their comrades who survived and who lived to see the outcome of their action. Gura Mahagif.
Thank you very much, Brian. I would now like to introduce Pauline Moynihan. Pauline is the cousin of John Bourne, the civilian who died after being getting caught in the crossfire. Pauline will lay a wreath in remembrance of the 4 civilians who died here today 100 years ago.
Thank you, Gary. As with most events in our history, the significance of the burning of the Custom House provides fertile ground for academic debate and discussion. Military historians have examined the outcome of this daring assault on the so-called symbol of British civil administration in Ireland. Opinion may be divided about its success or its failure, but what we do know with certainty is that just 6 weeks after this event occurred, a truce was agreed between the IRA and the British government, and so ended the War of Independence. On this day, we remember the deaths of everybody who lost their lives during the burning of the Custom House. In particular, I would like to name and remember the 4 civilians who were caught up in the historic events of this day: Francis Davis, Mahon Lawless, James Connolly, and another young man, my cousin John Byrne. John was cycling past the Custom House during his lunch break on his way home to Killarney Street when he was killed in the crossfire. John's family history was a microcosm of many Irish families at the time, families who had members on both sides of the divide. John had a granduncle, James Byrne, who was one of the first British soldiers to be awarded the Victoria Cross in India in 1858 for his life-saving actions under enemy fire. John's uncle, Augustine Byrne, fought in the Boer War and then World War I with the Royal Dublin Fusiliers, as did many other Irish men, who did so for either the noble principle of fighting in defence of small nations or merely as a means to an end to provide for themselves and their families. In complete contrast, a cousin of John's became an active IRA volunteer during the War of Independence with the 1st Battalion Dublin Brigade. He was my late grandfather, also named Augustine Byrne. With that tradition of soldiering, it is a sad irony that John Byrne, a civilian, was the one person in my family to die in conflict, and in his own neighbourhood too. Setting past wars aside, I am most happy that we are living in a time of peace in this beautiful country of ours, especially when we consider the many ongoing wars and conflicts across the globe. We must, as a nation, do everything in our power to remember and respect the past, but also to cherish this wonderful peace of ours and safeguard it for our children. May all our war dead rest in peace.
I now invite you all to observe a minute's silence.
Good morning. I'm here this morning to sing a song that I wrote about my dad, who was captured here 3 weeks shy of his 17th birthday 100 years ago. And this is dedicated to all the men that he fought with and all the women also. Fare thee well to you, my father, for now we must part, and along with your memory goes a piece of my heart. You have raised me to manhood and filled me with pride. I will always remember when I walked at your side. And the hours, they were happy, and the days full of joy, when I learned of my country through the eyes of a boy. You have led me to love the land of my birth, wherever I might be on the face of this earth. You have learned what is freedom, that you tasted firsthand when you fought to be free in this dear fertile land. You have shown me the beauty that lie on our shores, from the fair head in Antrim to the wilds of West Cork, from Dingle to Dublin, from Galway to Down. We will treasure our people and the land all around. And the days, they were happy, and the hours full of joy, when I learned of my country through the eyes of a boy. You have taught me of great men, Michael Collins, Wolfe Tone, sons and soldiers of Ireland, whose brave deeds are well known. Nevermore will I listen to the tales that you spun, for your wars are all over and your battle is won. And the hours, they were happy, and the days full of joy, when I learned of my country through the eyes of a boy. Thank you.
It was on the 25th of May 1921. Patrick clocked off on his break, there was real work to be done. The IRA battalion met at 1 or thereabouts. The order came down from the top to torch the Custom House. Paddy was 27, and Stephen just 19. Two brothers born and bred for the wearing of the green. Their father dead, their brothers all in turn are on the run. Tans were raiding mother's house, trying to find the guns. Glory-o, glory-o. Glory-o, glory-o. Paddy said to keep away, but justice on his mind. Stephen found a bag of bombs, he couldn't stay behind. As schoolboys they were sure of England's evil ways to learn, and those who suffer violence are violent in return. They came from tenement houses, they wore no uniforms. The police guard was soon disarmed as through the doors they stormed. Sean Doyle kissed his baby's head, that morning he kissed his wife. He didn't know that kiss would be the last one of his life. Glory-o, glory-o. Glory-o, glory-o. Paddy saw young Stephen, said, what did you come here for? To light the flame of freedom, brother, we won't be slaves no more. For all the cruelty, death and ruin brought into our land, with Pearson, Ash and Barry and McSweeney I must stand. Young men wore revolvers, some held petrol tins. Files were pulled from presses and soaked in paraffin. The office clerks prayed on the floor, the fire was raging wild. Oh, what a fine inferno, boys. Glory-o, glory-o. On we go. Glory-o, glory-o. Windows smoked like chimneys, the castle soon got word. Sent armoured cars and tenders and machine guns by the score. Dan Head was there at Orange to attack them with grenades. A boy of only 17 was killed in the fusillade. The Custom House caretaker, Frank Davis was his name. He thought about his family, his quarters catching flame. He ran out on the rooftop and signalled to the town. The shotgun blasted through his chest, the harp against the crown. Glory-o, glory-o. Glory-o, glory-o. Up in smoke, the Emerald Dome was spitting flames over Dublin town. The fire brigade arrived to help the Custom House burn down. The smoke was filling every room, Paddy covered his mouth. He held his pistol tightly, his time was running out. He dashed across the cobblestone, a cross hung on his breast. A couple of point-blank bullets sent him to his eternal rest. A gunshot made of hatred was the way young Stephen died. The city coroner called it justifiable homicide. Glory-o, glory-o. It's on we go. Glory-o, glory-o. Up in smoke. Wrap the green flag around me, boys. To die were far more sweet, with Erin's noble emblem, boys, to be my winding sheet. Sidney, when you went to identify your son, and cruel fate struck you, there were two instead of one. The bitter pangs of grief stayed forever by your side. Was it really worth the honour and the glory that they died? 100 years since Sidney, Reilly lost their sons to war. Spent their days in dreams and prayers they'd meet again once more. So long forgotten soldiers, tell me, was it love or hate? Or something in the air that led you to that awful fate? Glory-o, glory-o. It's on we go. Glory-o, glory-o. Up in smoke.